Hello, everyone out there watching us live on YourCentralValley.com. You just watched the press conference where head coach Jeff Tedford announced that he is stepping down effective immediately as Fresno State's head football coach. We've got the entire Sports Central team here. Andrew Martin alongside Julia Lopez and Scott Bemis. I guess, Julia, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on what you heard from Coach Tedford. We kind of had a suspicion this is what was going to take place today after that press conference that was sent out last night. You heard his words. You heard his thoughts. What do you think about what he had to say?
It was very genuine. I feel like he is the competitor that he is, that we know, and for him to step down means that it is really serious, and we have to take that. I just hope that his health is good, and I hope he really fixes that, but I think it's really hard for him to just step down. But I'm happy that he is concentrating on his health, and he's always going to be a Bulldog, and he will still be involved somehow within this program, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to be bringing in the future.
Coach Tedford actually had a heart problem when he was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL back in 2014. Scott Bemis, he admitted to us that a couple of weeks ago he had an issue after practice, and he kind of snuck in secretly to see his cardiologist. Nobody knew about it. So this is kind of a shock to the entire program, and I think the players and assistant coaches were shocked when they found out the news this morning.
Yeah, I remember when he was hired, back in, November of 2016, I believe it was, and I remember you and I at the introductory press conference, and we knew about the health situation that he had with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a couple years before that, in which, he had a couple blockages and he had a couple stents put in. And I remember us asking Coach Tedford about his health at that time, and he said, you know what, he felt great, and that he thought he was physically capable of doing this job at a high level. And he was physically capable of doing it at a high level. Speaking as someone who's had a father who dealt with heart issues, though, I know these things can creep back up on you. Even when you think you're kind of in the free and clear a little bit and you're feeling good, sometimes they can kind of sneak up on you. And it sounds like that's kind of what happened to Coach Tedford, that the stress and the anxiety of the job, his body maybe isn't at the spot that it needs to be to handle, a Division I college head coaching position. And so, as Julia mentioned, my first thought today when we heard from Coach Tedford, and you could see him getting emotional at times, got very emotional at the very end at one of the last questions, talking about how, if I've had time for me, and now it's time for my family and it's time to live. And that really struck me at that point in time. And I think the fact that Coach Tedford is still going to be in this community with his wife and his children who, are part of the Fresno State Athletic Department as well. I think, a transition is going to happen, but the fact that we're going to still see Coach Tedford in the Fresno community, that he's still with Fresno State football, I think that's a good thing for the Valley. It's obviously a sad day that a coach who did so much for the program is stepping down, but our first thoughts are with him and his health and his family.
That this second procedure that he needs to have in January, I forget the exact, an ablation, is not 100% success rate. It's about 70% success rate. But he said a couple of weeks ago when he realized that he had a heart issue again, he didn't know what it was. He thought it was anxiety, and so he went to his cardiologist one day after practice. So Jeff Tedford is no longer the head football coach at Fresno State. Offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb was named the interim. We asked Coach Tedford about that. We asked Director of Athletics Terry Toomey about that. How confident are you guys that Ryan Grubb can get this program where it needs to be until a permanent is named, permanent head coach?
I'm a fan of Ryan Grubb. I think he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's worked his way up in this program, and I really believe that Tedford believes in him. And he's a very animated guy. He's a professional guy, but he's also passionate about what he does, and I feel like this is the right time to have that type of guy try to recruit, because that's going to be the toughest part. You're trying to recruit guys right now and get them signed in February. So this is going to be a tough time, but I think Grubb is going to take advantage of it, and I feel like this is just got to run with it. And I think this is like the right guy to do that. And Terry did say that it's not going to take long to hire somebody. He said it's going to be a short process, that there's a lot of big names coming through, and I think they're in good hands right now.
Yeah, Fresno State had a down year, 4-8, but last year, 12-2 on top of the conference, in the top 25, ranked as high as 18th in the country. Scott, Ryan Grubb with this meteoric rise through Fresno State's system. He started out as an offensive line coach, has been an offensive coordinator for exactly one season, and that was this past season, 2019, after Kalen DeBoer leaves to go to Indiana. What do you think about Ryan Grubb in this interim role? And also, not to put you on the spot, but do you think he has a chance at the permanent job? Would he even want it?
That's a heck of a question. I don't know. The answer to that question is I don't know. There is so much uncertainty right now around this program because, yes, Ryan Grubb is the interim head coach. But as we heard Terry Toomey mention in the press conference, and it was brought up in one of the questions, this is a very awkward time to have a coaching change. And we understand why it's happening, obviously, because of the health issues with Coach Tedford. But a very awkward time with recruiting happening right now and early signing period happening before a new coach will even be named. So I agree with Julia. I think Ryan Grubb will do a great job as the interim head coach right now, going forward, putting in the time, out on the recruiting trail, gathering the assistants together and kind of getting them mobilized to continue to recruit for Fresno State football. And based on what Coach Terry Toomey was saying in there about, his message to the assistants, I kind of get the feeling that maybe some of these assistants more than usual might end up staying on whenever the new coach comes on. Of course, it depends who it is, obviously, but it kind of feels like maybe the first choice might be someone who has ties to the program and ties to these assistants. I'm reading the tea leaves here a little bit, so you never know what exactly will happen, but it kind of feels like, if Ryan Grubb isn't the guy who ends up getting the job, I would put him probably as a long shot. You never want to rule anybody out on the current staff, but probably a long shot at this point. But if it is someone, say, like a Kalen DeBoer who came in, I could see a bunch of these assistants staying on staff here at Fresno State. So I think it kind of feels right now that they're trying to find a way to kind of make the transition as smooth as possible. Whether that ends up being the case, we'll see.
Some of the names that have already been thrown out there, and I don't really want to get into the speculation game, but our former colleague George Takata threw out the name Corey Hall. His name was mentioned when Jeff Tedford was hired. I think his name was mentioned when Tim DeRuyter was hired as well. You mentioned Kalen DeBoer, current offensive coordinator at Indiana, also was the offensive coordinator for the previous 2 seasons in 2017 and 2018. Came here from Eastern Michigan along with Ryan Grubb to join Jeff Tedford's staff. Tim Skipper is another name that's been thrown out there. Former Bulldog. He's currently on the staff at UNLV as the defensive coordinator. But Terry Toomey mentioned, and Julia actually asked this question, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Bulldog. And we kind of all knew in November of 2016 when Jeff Tedford got the job that it was going to be Tedford, but when Tim DeRuyter got the job in 2012, he was completely not on the radar. People thought it would be Jim McElwain for that job. Pat Hill didn't really give his thoughts and wasn't really lobbying for anyone in particular, but it could be someone that we're not even thinking of. The biggest question that you have to ask, though, is what is this program going to look like in 2020? Because right now, as Terry Toomey said, and I think we're all in agreement, it is an attractive position, but Fresno State's coming off a 4-8 season where yet again the quarterback is leaving. It was another big senior class. 18 players are gone, and there is a lot of talent in the program, but this program right now is leaderless and I don't want to say directionless, but if you can come up with a better word, I'm certainly all ears to that one. So what do you guys think Fresno State is going to look like next year, regardless of who the head coach is?
Well, I want to throw out just a crazy name, too. Chris Peterson, too. He was fired from Washington, and he has connections with Jeff Tedford.
He wasn't fired. He stepped down. Chris Peterson is one of the winningest coaches of all time.
But can we just say that would be a crazy name to have, at least because he does have Jeff Tedford connection. He worked with him at Washington, so could you imagine? But, yes, I feel like...
Juliet, we love you.
I'm trying to imagine right now. Yeah. I don't know how the red wave...
Juliet, we love you very much.
I just had to toss that out.
The odds of Chris Peterson coming here are about the odds of Urban Meyer coming here.
That's why I said it's a long shot. But... I think Kalen DeBoer is obviously the name that keeps popping up, and he does have connections here. And then obviously it seems like the coaching staff would stay intact because he has worked with them, and it has worked well is the key. When Kalen DeBoer was here, they actually won games, they won a title, and obviously he's a successful coach. So that would be a really good thing that Scott said.
Scott?
Well, let me take that a little further. We have mentioned Kalen DeBoer, and he, for those of you who don't know, he's obviously the Indiana offensive coordinator right now. Spent the first 2 years as the offensive coordinator under Jeff Tedford, responsible for a big turnaround offensively, which helped those 2 teams get to the Mountain West Championship game, and of course, the 2018 team win the Mountain West title. Also, what about Orlando Steinauer as well?
CFL Coach of the Year this year.
CFL Coach of the Year, young guy. Up and coming, off the radar a little bit because he is in the CFL, but he did amazing things turning around that Fresno State defense, and we know that defensively there was some issues there with Fresno State this year. So I think both those guys, Kalen DeBoer and Orlando Steinauer, will definitely be on the top of their list. it remains to be seen whether they will be that interested in the job or not. I imagine they would certainly, with their ties here, at least want to listen to what Fresno State has to say. You can go the route of former Bulldogs, like you're talking about. Tim Skipper, I've heard his name thrown out there. Corey Hall, you mentioned George tweeted about him, the former Clovis North head coach. Also has some experience in the Pac-12 at Oregon State. You mentioned Jim McElwain right there.
Yeah.
He's had a good season at Central Michigan. I mean,
when Jim McElwain was the offensive coordinator, not to cut you off, Jim McElwain was the offensive coordinator in 2007 under Pat Hill. He now has head coaching experience because he's also coached at Julia's alma mater, Colorado State. I just want to end the speculation game right now because the truth is that we really.
So much fun.
The truth is that we really.
Throwing out SEC coordinators and everything else. Lane Kiffin.
The truth is
everybody.
Lane Kiffin, former grad assistant at Fresno State. Steve Sarkisian's
in
our.
Harrell, I'm a Trojan. Offensive coordinator at USC. Let's just throw out 50 names out there.
Here's what we'll say.
We'll be bound to get one.
We will obviously continue to follow this story and be sure to watch us on air today beginning at 11 o'clock. Full coverage coming up today and, of course, on Bulldog Insider Sunday, 9 p.m. on KC24. For Scott Bemis and Julia Lopez, I'm Andrew Martin. Thanks for watching us on YourCentralValley.com.